In professional sports, a franchise player is an athlete who is not simply the best player on their team, but one that the team can build their franchise around for the foreseeable future.
Welcome into a brand new edition of Franchise Players here on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com, part of your TGI Friday lineup across the entire Triad. You can hear us every Friday on WWBG 1470 AM in Guilford County at 5 p.m. If you missed it, you can hear it on WTOB 980 AM and 96.7 FM in Forsyth County, the Winston-Salem area at 6 p.m. Get you ready for your high school football kickoffs. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. Loaded show today. Got David Glenn back in for the sports buffet. He'll talk a little Carolina Panthers and a little college football. And, of course, we've got Marc Pruitt, brand new Winston-Salem Journal prep beat writer, back on it again. Will be giving us our top 3 high school football games of the week. Brandon Blakney waiting patiently here off the side. But he knew I had to take care of something first before we get into the action. We're going to talk a little NBA stuff with Brandon, host of Live with Brandon Blakney. But before we do that, I feel obligated to respond to something that happened earlier in the week that's been kind of still lingering over. And that's if you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw some of it earlier in the week regarding a situation with myself, the high schools that I deal with, and a prep writer out of Charlotte. So I wanted to prepare something as a response so we could go ahead and I could say this and I could end mine and be done with it and explain our actions and kind of go from there. So I wanted to put this out for everyone as a response to this who could not read it off of the Twitter account because it was blocked or whatever was going on. So earlier this week on Twitter, I found myself and my company, Tobacco Road Sports Radio, embroiled in a difference of opinion with a member of the media in Charlotte. Chris Hughes, who works for the Charlotte Observer primarily in their preps department, took issue with a tweet I sent out Monday regarding the weekly coaches show for Grimsley's football team that we produce every Monday night live at Natty Green's. Hughes' issue: the show is produced from Natty Green's restaurant in downtown Greensboro, a spot that Hughes labeled simply as a brewery. And his issue with doing high school coaches shows from quote unquote bars and breweries. Now, I don't want to misquote Chris because I'm not in that business. So let's actually look at his tweet that started all this on Monday. Never thought I'd see the day where bars and alcohol-based establishments are sponsoring high school football media shows. Shameful. In my 20-plus year career, I've never and would never promote anything alcohol around our youth. Even as sports media, we've got influence with kids. Do better. Wasn't going to do anything about this. Went through the rest of the week of the shows, spoke to the coaches and stuff. We'll get to that later. And then I realized this has been viewed over 26,000 times. So I felt the obligation to respond to this. Here's my issue from my view. For starters, these venues we select for these shows are not bars. They are restaurants that serve alcohol, which they are allowed to do. They are proud sponsors of the schools they host, and they're proud members of the community they reside in. To imply that these businesses have only one intention, which is to expose our prep athletes to alcohol, is not only insulting to said businesses, it's a slap in the face to the schools themselves. Grimsley, East Forsyth, West Forsyth, Glenn, multiple others across the Triad and the state for that matter. You're basically implying that A, these schools do not have the best interests of their kids at heart, and B, these kids are so naive that simply being in the vicinity of alcohol is enough to force them and influence them to drink. That is a ridiculous stance, or quote unquote hill to die on, with all due respect, sir. But your tweet wasn't what actually bothered me. It was the fact that you seemingly have been sitting on this opinion for a while. But instead of simply reaching out to me in private to get answers for whatever questions you had, you put it out intentionally on a public forum designed to benefit you. Not the schools, not the kids, not the small businesses, just you. That's where I and many of the coaches, players in the Triad and the staff at Tobacco Road take issue with here. Like Coach Prime said, I ain't hard to find, baby. It's easy to find me. You can text me, you can DM me, you can catch me on Facebook. I'm pretty sure you have my phone number. A simple DM or text we could have discussed all of your concerns, but that's not the route you took. So now here we are, where I'm questioning your intent. What was the goal or the end game supposed to be? Was it supposed to be public guilt? Was it supposed to be shame? All this literally stems from you, Chris Hughes, thinking one thing is going on when it's simply not. And because you didn't do due diligence and reach out to me, you have in effect alienated many people in the Triad. I'm not even mad at you, bro. You're entitled to your opinion, but opinions are not fact. I'm not the one you should even be concerned with. You should be concerned about all the schools Tobacco Road deals with that saw that tweet and don't agree with your stance. And there's a lot of them, trust me. They've been blowing up my phone all week. And now they're questioning your intent as well. All because an athlete's dad that came out to support his kid at a local coach's show had a beer at his table. Really? You think these kids are so feeble-minded that they can't make up that type of life decision at their team or school's coach's show? Having said all that, I invite you to come to one of these coaches' shows this season. Come to Natty Greens on Monday so you can see the players' faces where their teammates show up to support their big moment, guest starring on the show that week. Come to Monty Del Rey in Kernersville on Tuesday nights. Come see and feel the family atmosphere of parents, coaches, players, fans that East Forsyth show has grown into over 5 seasons. That's 60 plus people every Tuesday night we're bringing into that establishment. There's a reason why they use the saying it's just different at East Forsyth. I invite you to stop by and see for yourself, because seeing a picture of it on Twitter is simply not enough to base a true opinion on. Come to Lito's Pizza in Kernersville on Tuesday nights. Check in with the Glenn Show. Come out to Clemens and see how Titans Talk has exploded this year in attendance as this program builds something special under head coach Kevin Wallace. Come see the proud parents cheer on their kids and the looks on their faces that they're being included in their kids' success. Because I don't do these shows for the money. I don't do it for the clicks. I don't do it for the notoriety. I do it for these kids. I do it for the grandma down in Florida that can't watch her granddaughter play softball because it's too far away. I do it for the running back that's super good, but has gotten no D1 offers yet because no one has heard him. I do it for that offensive lineman that never gets credit for simply doing his job. Those shows make these kids feel important. Never once in 5 years has a parent or school, for that matter, complained about the locations we do these shows. In fact, usually it's the school that recommends to us the location to do the show at. Should the school stop accepting the help from that establishment because they serve alcohol? The Charlotte Observer runs ads for local bars across their website. You're promoting a North Carolina beer bash right at this moment on your website. Do you think those ads are influencing teenagers to drink? It's weird at worst and hypothetical at best, or hypocritical at best, excuse me. I can't say this any other way. The presence of adults drinking adult beverages while watching their children be great isn't pushing alcohol on the kids. That's crazy talk. I do this for the schools because they deserve it. The kids deserve it. The families deserve it. And I refuse to allow an opinion that isn't even accurate taint or hinder our progress as we continue to grow. As for us, cool. But next time you want to talk about something Tobacco Road is involved in and you don't agree with it, DM me. Because doing this with a tweet to get clicks and then asking local Triad coaches to retweet it on your behalf, that is what truly is shameful about this entire episode. Follow us on Twitter at Tobacco Radio. Brandon, you okay? You good?
Hey, I'm chilling. I'm chilling. Pop your stuff.
I'm just saying, man. You don't use me or my company or the people that work with me, the schools, the kids, the parent. Like, I've fielded so many different phone calls and messages about this. People just stopping me as I'm walking into places to talk about it. And I felt like the only way to do it was to do it like that, as opposed to getting into a Twitter back and forth or whatever the case may be. I feel like I covered the entire gamut of what needed to be covered there. So, like I said, I was going to say mine and end mine, and we're going to move on to the NBA and Dame time. I wanted to bring Brandon on because he's our NBA expert, Sports Carolina Monthly contributor, host of Live with Brandon Blakney on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. Dame Lillard heading to the Milwaukee Bucks in a 3-team deal. Tell me, Brandon, how surprised were you that Dame ends up going to Milwaukee instead of his preferred preference, which was Miami, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, honestly, Des, I was pretty shocked by the whole thing, especially with all the talking heads and all the headlines speaking about Dame going to Miami. He made it very well known that that was his preferred destination. And then Milwaukee comes out and earns big points, I think, in the Keep Giannis in Milwaukee for Life sweepstakes.
Oh, boy. Yes, sir.
You know, Lillard's a friend of his. They played together. Was his first pick from the All-Star team. You know what I'm saying? And gives them a creator, a ball handler, and a number one option when Giannis doesn't have it going, to be honest with you, man. And I'm thinking I'm picturing Trae Young right now getting put in that Giannis and Dame pick and roll, and I'm just crying for him.
Barbecue chicken. So it's a 3-team deal. I'm gonna try to lay it out. So the Trailblazers, they trade Lillard to the Bucks. It was the Bucks, the Suns, and the Trailblazers. Portland got Drew Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, Milwaukee's 2029 unprotected first-round draft pick, and then unprotected draft swap rights with Milwaukee in 2028 and 2030. The Suns got Jusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. When I first looked at this, my immediate thought, it wasn't even about Milwaukee. I looked at oh, damn, the Suns got a bench, because that was the one thing that I felt like was keeping them, away from me really seriously looking at them as contenders. They were real top heavy, but this trade accomplishes everything they wanted to do. They got Ayton out of there. They got some pieces on the bench that'll be Grayson Allen and Nasir Little by themselves. Those athletic wings that can come in there and sub out Beal and Durant. You got the contract for Nurkic. You got that out of there and planted that on Portland. I thought out of the three, the Suns and of course Milwaukee pairing up Dame and Giannis together, I thought they won the deal. I felt like Portland just they got some stuff. They got back more than they probably thought they were going to get back for Dame, it feels like. But I don't know if they necessarily won anything in this deal.
I don't know, man. Just starting off, obviously love the move. Dame, Kenny Middleton, Giannis, that big three is going to be fun. Bobby Porter's there to do the dirty work still. And then looking at it from the Suns' perspective, you said it. They get some athletic wings that can knock down shots. Nasir Little, Keon Johnson, Grayson Allen when he ain't tripping, folks. No shade. They get they get a little more athletic. You know what I'm saying? A little bit more
faster,
toughness. Yeah,
all of them.
They get a little, but they get a little tougher, like you said, because they were looking kind of older on the wings with T.J. Warren and there were some other guys that were out there, Terrence Johnson, those guys. So yeah, you get a little bit deeper with the Suns, and the problem I think they were better with Ayton, like the starting five obviously was.
Mm-hmm.
Nurkic hasn't played over 60 games in 4 years. They need a defensive rim protector. He has been that in the past. So if they can keep him healthy and get him back to, just blocking shots and grabbing rebounds and dunking it, it'll be cool. The problem with Ayton is he's a better player, obviously, at this point in his career. But he didn't know how to be the fourth option for this group. And he was pouting. And I think eventually he was going to kill the team chemistry. So they had to get him out of there. Looking at Portland, though, I love what they did. They have DeAndre Ayton now, one of the top big men. They have an established big man, rim protector, low post option who can expand on his game now because they're going to need him to do a lot more than what he was doing with the Phoenix Suns. And I think it'll help the development of these young guards, Des. Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons. I think having them running that pick and roll, being able to get second chance possessions with Ayton crashing the boards, they got a really nice young core now to build around. Then you add in Drew Holiday, who's another trade piece where they can move him and potentially add some more assets too.
Well, that was one of the two questions I had regarding this. Let's just stay right there with Drew Holiday. They've already said they're going to try to trade him to a contender. Where would you like to see him end up? Where would what's the best case scenario for him? Is it Miami, or would you maybe need the Lakers? Or
I would honestly, I'm a Bron guy, but I really, and I tweeted this earlier, Des. I think you could honestly make the case and the argument that Drew Holiday's style of play and his game fits the Miami Heat system and what Coach Spoelstra wants to do more so. I mean, you're bringing in a 6'4", 6'5", big point guard, long playmaker, can operate and initiate offense and be that playmaker. But all the defensive pressure on the perimeter isn't on Jimmy anymore now. Because Drew Holiday and Jimmy Butler strapping up on the perimeter, it's going to be a long night for you. I don't care who you are.
And there was a lot of times in the finals where Jimmy kind of disappeared. And looking back on it, I think he was just tired. There was stretches where he was just flat out tired. He couldn't will his body to do what it was for a full 4 quarters. I got you in the first. I got you in the third, but y'all got to bring me home on this game. And then he would just kind of save it up for the next game or whatever. To your point, you wouldn't have to do that if Drew was there. And they still, I mean, Drew Holiday, Dame Lillard, they're two different types of players, but Miami needs that position. They need that point to lead.
Kyle Lowry's not getting it done.
Yeah, he's like 40.
Yeah, so, and you don't have to give up a whole lot. Like, you kept Tyler Herro, you kept those draft picks that they just got. Jovic, I like him. He killed in the World Cup. I think he's going to take a lot of people by surprise, kid out of Serbia. But I like that move. I think also, man, the Clippers should be all in. They're another team. I think big if, Des, because we've talked about this battle for LA years and years that we're so excited for. And, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are hardly ever on the court. So I feel like maybe they're coming back with something to prove. But you look at them, maybe, and then the obvious other pick, the Lakers or the Celtics. And I think the Celtics, if they make that move, that might put them over the edge with Jrue Holiday as the starting point guard. I mean, you're getting a better Marcus Smart, somebody that can bring that defensive intensity, but still be a knockdown shooter as well and bully smaller guards in the post. So I think that those are some teams to look out for with him.
Well, the Clippers, that would mean trading Russell Westbrook because they just signed him up to extension or whatever, right? So he's kind of with the Clippers. And I just saw on ESPN, I think dropped yesterday, that the Clippers are saying Kawhi is going to be fully healthy when he arrives at camp this year. So yeah,
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I hope so, man. I mean, we've been robbed of them, and Paul George has been talking real greasy on his podcast, feeling disrespected, said he's coming back on his bully ball. But it sucks too for the Lakers, man. If they were able to move D'Angelo Russell, I think swapping him and maybe a pick or something for Jrue Holiday, like if you gave Bron and Austin Reeves and those guys and AD Jrue Holiday, and he's coming back to the crib as a LA kid.
Oh, that's right. Man. Yeah. That I didn't even think about that. Yeah. And see, I'm trying to decide what I want, D'Angelo Russell or I want Jrue Holiday. I want Jrue Holiday because I saw D'Angelo kind of fade in the playoffs a little bit. I know they re-signed him too because they didn't want to go after Kyrie. So maybe. Now I want to go to the Eastern Conference real quick before I get you out of here. Milwaukee vaulted up the odds when this happened to have the best odds to win the NBA champ, or at least come out of the East. Are you buying that? Is Milwaukee the team to beat in the East? Or because I'm still kind of stuck on Boston, to be honest. I don't know if this was enough for Milwaukee to get past Boston.
I absolutely think on paper, like it looks really, they're the sexy pick right now. It looks really good. And if they perform the way that they're supposed to and expected to, I think they're the best team in the East. But yeah, the Bucks. But I mean, we have to see it. And I'm not convinced on what ifs. Like, I got to see it. And right now we haven't seen them. And people forget how crucial Jrue Holiday was to that finals run. Yeah. Giannis doesn't have a ring without Jrue Holiday. I'm going to just say that now. But, you got the Celtics, you got the Heat are still going to be there. I think Jrue Holiday, depending on where he lands, could still tip some scales. But, yeah, I mean, it's the usual suspects. We got to see what the Sixers are going to do as well. They'll be in the running.
Yeah, the James Harden situation. Man. I mean, could he end up getting traded for James Harden? That won't really match money-wise, but
they would have to give up, I think. I think the Sixers would want more than Jrue Holiday, but it would be a cool reunion since I think he started his career there, or maybe it was the Pelicans, then he went there, but he played with the Sixers.
That sounds before. Right. I think he was with the Pelicans, then went there, and then got moved again. He's moved around a couple times. Then maybe they're not going to keep him because they drafted Scoot. So Portland.
Yeah, they're definitely going to get him out of there. But I tell you, man, a starting lineup with those guys like Scoot, Simons, and Jrue Holiday.
A fun little group, yeah.
Ayton out there, Jeremy Grant, I'm assuming, Jeremy Grant. Like that, I mean, that would be a fun five, but I definitely see them getting him off the books, yeah.
Let me ask you this one last thing before I get you out of here, and that's with my beloved Hornets. Playoffs?
I think it depends on how the East goes. I will say this, though. I'm thinking they're going to get anywhere from between 35 to 40 wins this year. If everybody comes back, Melo missed like majority of the season. I think he played like 20 games. Yeah. If he's healthy, Miles Bridges is back in action. We're still Miller, I like it. They're young. Terry Rozier, they got some young pieces. I mean, we're not sure who's all going to be on the team. Is Kai Jones going to be there? Like, I
don't know what he's doing. Like, I do talk about acting up on social media. This dude is off the chain. Like, where did this come from? He wasn't even doing this until like a couple months ago.
I think the NBA YoungBoy music got him, and that's what's wrong with a lot of these young boys. That YB just grabs them, but
oh my God,
it's disappointing because that's a role player that I'm sure they have visions of him potentially being the guy in the middle one day. But I like what the Hornets did in the draft, and I mean I could see them getting a play-in spot and maybe sneaking into the playoffs. I'd take them over the Hawks.
Yeah, I mean, and they were 2 years ago when they were healthy. They got into the play-in. They got the brakes beat off of them by the Hawks, but they got in. They were right there, right around 40 wins. I think 38, 39 wins or something like that. Now it's before adding, Mark Williams and now Brandon Miller. Like they've collected pieces to put around LaMelo, and of course, in the offseason, LaMelo signs the richest contract in Hornets history, over $250 million to be there for the next 6-7 years or whatnot. So they're trying to build around LaMelo. I'm hoping that this is a year that they win more often than they lose. We still got about a month to go before the beginning of the regular season. So Brandon will be back with me. Rundown's on hiatus. So I'll have Brandon come back through, talk a little NBA. And as we get closer to it, some college basketball too, because I'm totally lost on where anybody is.
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a whole bunch of Bronny James talk, and we'll get through the rest.
Yeah, so we'll get into all of that too. So Brandon, man, appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate you letting me vent at the beginning of this segment and getting that out. Thanks for talking a little NBA.
Most definitely, man. Appreciate you having me.
Coming up, DG, David Glenn, award-winning show host here in the state of North Carolina, part of the North Carolina Sports Network. He's going to stop by on his bi-weekly jaunt to the sports buffet. We'll touch on everything from college football to the Carolina Panthers. Back in just a bit, you're listening to Franchise Players here on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com and WWBG, WTOB, AM and FM.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome back into Franchise Players here on WWBG 1470 AM's TGI Friday lineup. Also, you can hear us on WTOB, the encore presentation at 6 p.m. every single Friday, and of course online at TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. Sitting in with me in his bi-weekly jaunt to Franchise Players. He's from the North Carolina Sports Network. Really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. David Glenn in the house. What's going on, DG? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Des. It's always good to be back with you.
So I want to hop right into it. We do a segment called Sports Buffet with DG, so I can kind of have him hop around a bunch of different topics relative to us here in North Carolina. And I got to start off with college football and the ACC. There are 6 undefeated teams right now in the ACC. Of course, FSU, the highest ranked at number 4 or 5. I can't remember where they're at right now this week. And I think they're on a bye this week as well. Louisville, Duke, Carolina, who's also on a bye this week, Miami, Syracuse. NC State and Wake Forest are 3-1. Is this the strongest you've seen the ACC in, say, maybe 4 or 5 years? I know 2019 we had a pretty good year. There was 2016 or so when Lamar Jackson won the Heisman.
2016 was the monster year for the ACC. That's what they need more of.
Yeah.
Why have they fallen so far behind the SEC and the Big Ten financially? Well, their football product most years is just kind of okay. And occasionally is really good and really deep. And if anybody wants to go back and look at 2016, man, it was Clemson winning the national title. It was 5 different teams finishing in the national top 25. It was more than 10 bowl teams. It was Lamar Jackson winning the Heisman Trophy as the Louisville Court. I mean, it was incredibly – it was what you usually expect of the SEC in football. It's just that the ACC became that for 1 year. There's a chance it's happening right before our eyes because Florida State is for real. Florida State is the best team in this league. They're not unbeatable. If Clemson had kicked a field goal, the Seminoles would have lost at Death Valley. Yeah. But I think they're the best team in the league, and they have 2 fantastic wins in that LSU opener and then winning at Clemson. So I think the Seminoles are going to be in Charlotte in that ACC title game. And what's fun is, unlike most years where it's far more predictable, and remember, there's no divisional format this year deciding the title matchup.
Right.
With Clemson already having 2 conference losses, losing at Duke and then losing to FSU, the door is wide open for Carolina or Duke or one of the other teams that you mentioned to maybe face the Seminoles with an ACC title on the line. I mean, it's been Clemson 7 of the last 8 times, and then it was Florida State 3 straight prior to that.
Wow.
So we've gotten an awful lot of Clemson and FSU in the last dozen years. Maybe it is time for one of these other teams, including undefeated Duke or Carolina, to make a run at not only a trip to that game, but having a chance to beat probably FSU in that game.
Let's start right there with Duke and Carolina. Carolina's on a bye this week, but Duke's got a huge game Saturday against 11th ranked Notre Dame. College game day going to be in Durham.
Yeah.
Does Duke have a shot to win this game? Because it's not like Notre Dame is like juggernaut coming into to Durham or whatnot. And Duke has looked pretty good the first 4 weeks of the season.
Is Duke the underdog? Yes, but by only about 6 points the last I saw. They were a 2-touchdown underdog to Clemson and beat the Tigers, obviously. And remember, they beat the Tigers convincingly. That was a 28-7 ball game.
Yeah.
I do think Notre Dame, because of that monster offensive line, a really good running back that we saw against NC State, Audric Estime, and then Sam Hartman, the former Wake Forest guy, is the Irish's quarterback. That's a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. And I think there's a question how Duke's defense, which has been great. I mean, they're giving up less than 10 points per game, the Blue Devils. How does that defense hold up against probably the best offensive line they've seen maybe in their whole college career? I don't know the answer to that X and O tactic, but certainly the Blue Devils have a chance because remember last year when Mike Elko went 9-4, even though he's a defensive guru guy and that's his reputation, it was the Devils offense that carried the Devils a year ago. This is a much more well-balanced team, offense, defense, special teams. Their average score in their 4-0 start, Des, and I don't know if I've ever seen this from a Duke football team, and I'm 37 years into following Duke. Their average score is 37-9. And I know some of those were very beatable opponents, but one of them was Clemson. I mean, one of them was Northwestern of the Big Ten. These aren't all cupcakes, right? 37-9. These Devils are a really good football team. That can they slow down the Irish running game? That to me is the first fork in the road of how this game is going to unfold. But Riley Leonard, as a dual threat quarterback, gives the Devils a chance against just about everybody. And he made some huge plays with his arm and his legs to beat the Tigers of Clemson to start the season.
Is there a dark horse out of all those teams that I mentioned that are all undefeated right now? Because we'll take FSU out of it because they're in a driver's seat to get into the college football playoff, or they just basically went out. Is there a dark horse in your mind out of the rest of them, Louisville, Duke, Carolina, Miami, Syracuse, to maybe make a run as well into the college football playoff?
It feels weird to call the Miami Hurricanes a dark horse, but that would be my answer. Because on the one hand, they're a 5-time national champion, but on the other hand, they haven't done any of that since they joined the Atlantic Coast Conference, right? So I think by now it's fair to call them a dark horse, right? What are they, 18 years into their ACC membership?
Yeah.
And they've never won an ACC title. They've actually won a couple of basketball, and they still don't have one in football.
That's amazing.
I think this is year 2, remember, under Mario Cristobal. Anybody who hasn't seen Tyler Van Dyke, the Hurricanes quarterback this year, he's been riding that roller coaster the last 2 years as the Canes starter behind some pretty bad offensive lines at times. He's playing by 100 miles the best college football of his career. He has a good running back in Henry Parrish. Cristobal, remember, is a former offensive lineman at Miami, and he's really put a lot of energy into finding transfers and just cultivating the offensive line culture. So they're running it and they're throwing it. And they have the usual athletes that they have on defense. So it feels like, every year or two we're asking, are these Canes really for real? Like that is just a perpetual question. And here we are again. Are these Canes for real? I do think they're a potential 10-win football team at Miami. And of course, if you can get to that point, you do have a shot to get to Charlotte and that ACC title game.
Follow him on Twitter at David Glenn Show. David Glenn, award-winning sports talk host with us here from the North Carolina Sports Network. Go follow them on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button for them. Lots of great content, including the return of the David Glenn Show in podcast format. You can go over there and check that out there. NBA, huge trade this week, bringing Damian Lillard to Milwaukee from Portland as a 3-team deal. Phoenix basically got a bench. That's their Little, Grayson Allen, Nurkic, a couple of guys going there. and then some guys and some picks going up to Portland, including DeAndre Ayton, the center who was a key part of the Suns run a couple years ago to the NBA Finals. Are the Bucks the title favorites now with Dame and Giannis Antetokounmpo? Is they're 1-2?
I think they are. That's the starting point in the NBA, right? It's a top-down league. And if you don't have a big two or preferably a big three, in most years, you just don't have a chance to compete at that top level. So I think it does start with the Bucks. Obviously, the Nuggets deserve respect, and they'll be highly regarded. The Celtics, the Suns, the Sixers, the Warriors, it's going to be a fun top half dozen to watch. But I think the short answer to your question is yes. Giannis is Giannis, Dame is Dame. And I know his request to get out did not unfold the way he wanted or the way the Miami Heat wanted. And there's a lot of chatter about that. But I think this transaction is a reminder that whereas NBA stars have as much leverage as athletes in any sport that we follow, they don't have unlimited leverage, right? They can't just sign a long contract with the Blazers and then pick the team that they want. It doesn't work that way, and It shouldn't work that way. Although some players seem mad
about
ending up in Milwaukee.
It's almost there, though.
It's close.
It's getting there. The player, you're right. The NBA players are probably they have the strongest player union probably in all of professional sports in terms of the control they have in comparison to the owners of that league. Staying in the NBA, I was going to ask you if you thought the Hornets are a playoff team, but then we were talking off camera before we started about how there's almost a disconnect with the general public in North Carolina and the Hornets, which is a reversal for me and you, because we've been around since they first got here in the late 80s, and that was before the Panthers. It was just the Hornets, and they were the hottest ticket in town, in the NBA for that matter. I think they had the record for consecutive sellouts for it was a bunch of years, like 18 years or something nuts. And do you think that they can get back to that? Because one of the components that I mentioned that caused that was the ability for the Hornets to be on over-the-air television, a free television. They had their own network of affiliates throughout the state. So you could watch the Hornets versus the Bucks on a Tuesday night in January just by flipping the dial over and watching it. Now I think they just renewed their deal with Bally. Good deal, bad deal for the Hornets. Like, what would if you could control how the Hornets content went out? And we actually run Charlotte Hornets radio network through Tobacco Road here in the Triad on WWBG through the season. So you can hear the Hornets here in the Triad through Tobacco Road. But what would you do if you were in charge of that to increase not awareness of the Hornets, but to get back to that feeling of when they first got here and it was like everybody felt like they were all in on Charlotte?
Yeah. I think you have to start with exposure, right? I mean, there are people paid to make the decisions. How much do you go for the money in your media deals? How much do you go for the exposure? Obviously, this channel is in X million households. This other channel is in, more millions of households. And there's always a financial aspect to it. But the bottom line, Des, to me, is the three most lucrative sports leagues in the world. This is not an exaggeration. It's the NFL by far at number one. And you and I have lived in North Carolina for a long time. Ever since we got the Panthers way back when, fans here not only care about the NFL more generally, and they're watching Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, even when the Panthers are not involved, they do care about the Panthers. And I've seen that through Super Bowl trip years, but also, horrible 3-13 type years. They care about the Panthers, actually in both Carolinas, really. And we don't have a Major League Baseball team, which is one of the big three, but we of course have had the Hornets since the late 1980s. And the difference there, even though I believe our state is a big consumer of the NBA more generally, that star-driven league following LeBron and his various stops and following the drama of last year where it was less predictable and a different team winning it all. There's still plenty of passion for the NBA here. But I have seen a gradual deterioration statewide or Carolinas wide of interest in the Hornets specifically. Now that it is trending up because there are more players worth watching right now, right? I mean, LaMelo Ball is a star and Gordon Hayward's a good player and Brandon Miller's a fascinating young talent and on and on. But this is a team, Des, it's hard to even hear me say this out loud. They have not won a playoff series in more than 2 decades. I mean, and they've only made the playoffs a couple times in that 2 decades.
Yeah.
When you got to go all the way back to, the turn of the century, basically, it was 2002 that they won a series. I remember the Alonzo Mourning, Larry Johnson grandmama years.
That's the peak.
There you go.
That was the
right
peak.
Behind Des.
Yeah.
People cared, and they were good. They were fun to watch. They won a lot. They made the playoffs. They had high picks, but then they took advantage of those high picks and turned them into real stars. Now they got a good one in Ball, but they might be a playoff team this year. Now they're interesting enough that I would, if I ran the Hornets, I want people to see them so that they can fall in love with them. Whether they barely miss the playoffs, barely make the playoffs, or whatever, I think they're a middle of the pack team that could go either way, and they're not anywhere near that half a dozen contenders that we talked about a minute ago.
It makes me think of the Phoenix Suns, the guy that just bought them. He basically made it a point to put them on over-air television this upcoming season. And at the time when people saw it, they're like, why would you do that? But now as more time has passed and I think more about it, I'm like, that's genius, because now he can make up the money other places or whatever. It doesn't have to be on like a cable network or whatever. He can get it through those affiliates, honestly. And it'll do so much more for him on the other side in terms of exposure for the Suns, merchandise sales, all that kind of stuff. He can get all that back on the back end, but he's doing something for the fans. And like the fans are going to feel that connection for it. And the Hornets with the new ownership had a similar opportunity to do the same thing, but went back to Bally's because to me, it was just easier to keep doing what you were already doing, but it's cutting people off from the product. So you can't really connect to a product you can't touch. So that's a main issue with them. Before I get you out of here for today, though, got to touch on my Panthers. They're 0-3. They're completely banged up. I think like half the starters are hurt at this point. Give me something good that you have seen so far from the Carolina Panthers that we can latch on to. Hosting the Minnesota Vikings Sunday at 1 o'clock on Fox. It looks like Bryce is going to start from this mysterious ankle injury that he had last week versus the Saints. Just give me something good, DG.
If I was a better singer, Des, I would give you a tell me something good, right? And it's a great question, right? Because I saw ESPN power rankings this week from 1 through 30, and the Panthers were dead last, number 30.
Right? Wow, that's not really fair.
It hurts a little because to me, the hope is when they're healthy, they have a pretty solid defense. I mean, Brian Burns is a superstar. They're playing hard on that side of the ball. They look well coached on that side of the ball. They've already been hit by a few injuries on that side of the ball, so that's an alarm. I had Jake Delhomme, the former Panthers quarterback, 20 years ago. He actually led the Panthers to that Super Bowl against the Patriots in 2003. And he talked about the owner, David Tepper. He talked about the young quarterback, Bryce Young, through the eyes of a former quarterback himself. He talked about Frank Reich as an offensive-minded new head coach of the Panthers. And Jake, I mean, he's a broadcaster for the team, so you know he's going to be somewhat optimistic. But he had a lot of thoughtful comments about all three of those guys and why he believes there are going to be growing pains this year. There's that crazy stat, Des, that since the 1960s, only one number one overall pick at quarterback has had a winning record in his rookie year. One in 50-plus years, and that was Andrew Luck of the Colts a while back. Even legends, even guys who made the Hall of Fame after being number one overall as a quarterback, mostly face planted in their rookie year. There's some really ugly records, 3-13 types. I don't know if the Panthers will end up that bad. Bryce Young is a smart guy. He's a good leader. He works his tail off. He's in the video room. There's no worries about him off the field. To me, I'm not ready to jump off the bandwagon as if the Panthers made a massive mistake by trading up to get him. Obviously, if he doesn't pan out, they just set this franchise back a couple of years. But it's way too early to make that conclusion right now. And because he has a good head on his shoulders, I still think he has a chance to be a good quarterback in this league.
Guys, keep in mind, even Cam Newton's rookie year, 2011, he had in his prime Steve Smith as the number one wide receiver. He had Greg Olson, Jeremy Shockey at tight end. He had my guy Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams at running back. Yeah. Jordan Gross was still at left tackle. Like, he had a squad at offense. They went 6-10. So, I mean, and they had a little defense too. They literally had a roster you just parachuted a quarterback into, and Cam played great his rookie year. still went 6-10. So I think we're tempering our expectations a little. Well, some of us are in terms of the Panthers. Others are still expecting perfection. So we'll see what happens Sunday at Bank of America Stadium. The Panthers taking on the Vikings. DG will be back week after next in Sports Buffet. Always appreciate having you on, brother.
Great to be with you, my friend. Keep up the good work.
Coming up, Winston-Salem Journal prep beat writer Marc Pruitt will join us to preview his top 3 high school football games of the week. Tonight, we've got 2 of them more than likely. We'll talk about that more in just a bit. You're listening to Franchise Players here on WWBG 1470 AM and WTOB 980 AM.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome into segment 3 of Franchise Players. Desmond Johnson is me. I'm your host. Shout out to David Glenn for stopping by earlier today for Sports Buffet, and our boy Brandon Blakney, who came through to talk a little NBA and that trade with Dame Lillard to Milwaukee. Coming in right now, he is the Preps beat writer, the new Preps beat writer for the Winston-Salem Journal. Marc Pruitt joining us as he does each week during the high school football season to preview his top 3 Triad area games to look forward to tonight. Marc, what's up, man? How you doing?
How we doing? Happy Friday, Desmond.
Happy Friday. Happy Friday. It actually feels like fall. I can actually pull hoodies out and actually wear them now.
Yes.
We're in that sweet spot of the calendar. We're in week 7, good Lord, of the high school football season. This thing's gone by stuff. We got 4 weeks to go before the regular season is done.
Seems like we just kicked this thing off yesterday.
I know, right? Sweating in August, and now it's like we're in conference play. Got a couple of hot games tonight. Give me your game number 1 that you're looking forward to in the Triad out of Marc's top 3 games of the week.
All right, let's start in Pufftown, Davie County, 4-1, heading to Reagan, probably the best 1-4 team in the state. Picked up its first win last week against Glenn, and running back Jalen Moore went off. Finally, kind of really got going. I think 200 plus yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. What's interesting to me about the Davie game, coming off a big win last week against East Forsyth. Davie's won 4 straight games, and I kind of had them as a wild card entering the season, not really knowing what to expect out of them. But what I saw last week really opened my eyes. They are very good, very balanced, great quarterback play, great running back. Quarterback spreads the ball around. And I think really got after East on the offensive and defensive lines last week and put up 41 points on the Eagles, which I don't think's happened in a while. I think I remember West beat them.
West reminded me Wednesday. Yeah, that was the last time. That was 2019. So, they won. That was a shootout, too. It was 41-38. So it was.
That one went back and forth. I remember the lead changing that one a whole bunch.
Yeah, that was a crazy game.
Davie's very impressive. Ty Miller, the quarterback, threw for 321 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. I want to see them kind of build on that momentum, and they're going to a tough environment in Pufftown. I think it's homecoming out at Reagan this week, so it'll probably be a good. All of Pufftown will be there, obviously, and I imagine a lot of Moxville is going to be there too. But Davie's won 4 straight, and in those 4 wins, they put up 60, 32, 47, and 41 points, so they can score the ball. So I'm interested to see how they respond, see if they can keep that momentum going against another pretty good team in Reagan tonight.
I will say, me and Rod Funderburk, who call the East Forsyth games for the East Forsyth Sports Network on Tobacco Road, Rod pointed out to me right before the game started from the booth. He was like, "Look at the size of Davie's line. Like they were big. Yeah, they are big boys. And they were. He also pointed out, really, in the first quarter, how East was getting crowned, which we're not used to seeing. I think me and him have been calling East games since 2018, but really full time 2019 till now, and we've only called, not counting the 2021 spring season, because that was basically their JV that was playing a varsity schedule. We've really only called 4.
You haven't seen them lose too much in the last 4 or 5 years. Right?
Yeah, I mean, last year they were undefeated through the regular season. The year before they were 1 loss in the regular season. That was to Reagan. In 2019, they lost to Reagan and West. Didn't win the conference, but they went back to back and won the 4A title in 2019. Yeah, so it's weird for us to call a game where East loses it was even weirder to call that game because they got blanked in the second half till the very end.
I think the late touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a 21-20 lead at halftime.
Yeah, East was
I'm
leading at half.
remembering correctly.
And boom,
then just Davey came out and scored twice, and I was standing beside Alan Plaster on the sidelines, and I said, "Y'all are in trouble." And he said,
Yeah.
"I think so."
Yeah.
So it was it opened my eyes, and I was like you being down on the sideline last week. They were big. Davey was huge up front,
Mhm.
and that I didn't know that going into the game. But talking to Coach Willard after the game, he said he kind of had this game kind of circled on the calendar just because he knew what Davey had coming back from last year,
Yeah.
and they'd be a year older, stronger, faster. So he knew they were going to be up against it, but it was still a great performance by Davey last week. And I think I said this Wednesday night at Mossy's for the West Forsyth show. It felt like the balance of power in the Central Piedmont Conference shifted west.
Yeah, I didn't like hearing that
after that game.
When you said it, I was like, oh. But I watched it. I watched that game. I was like, he might be right because Davey's going to have something to say about the CPC when it's all said and done. Now, we'll say this: out of all those games I've called for East the past 4 or 5 years, whenever a team has beaten East Forsyth, either regular season or playoffs since 2019, they have lost the following game, and that includes Huff twice in the playoffs. They've lost the very next game. So keep an eye on that. We'll see what happens with this Davey Reagan matchup. Give me your second game for the week here in the chat.
All right. Well, let's go to Kernersville, and this one's interesting to me. We'll have East Forsyth at home. I think is a homecoming out there too this week. Is that
no?
I know it's a TV game, right?
Yeah, my 48 will be out there. Me and Rod will be calling for Tobacco Road. I think homecoming is Reynolds in like 2 weeks. So no, this isn't homecoming, but it is Mount Tabor. So.
Okay, but Mount Tabor, yep. And what interests me about this game is seeing how East Forsyth responds to the loss last week. But even more interesting to me, I think, is how Mount Tabor responds to 2 straight losses in the conference. And last week, especially against Reynolds, was probably the most shocking score around the state of North Carolina.
Shout out to Coach Davidiak, David Davidiak.
Yes.
Good Davidiak over there. That young, I think he's 26 or something like that.
26, first head coaching job. He's got a ton of energy, and he just believes in what they're doing over there. He has those guys believing, I think, last week now. Because that's a big win. That's a statement win for that program.
Absolutely.
Which I would have to go back and double check this, but I can't remember a conference opponent Reynolds has beaten other than Parkland in the last 8-9 years. So that's a big win. Mount Tabor's got some injuries up on the defensive line. I know they turned the ball over a couple times early in that game. One of them was a pick six, I think, in the first quarter. But Reynolds led most of that game. I think Mount Tabor didn't take the lead until sometime in the late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter. Until the game-winning field goal by the Demons. But that one surprised me, and I think it surprised pretty much everybody around here. So interesting to see how East comes off that loss and how Mount Tabor tries to rebuild. I still think Tabor's going to have something to say about the conference race because they can spoil everybody else's conference season now.
Yeah.
They're talented. They're still very talented, and they've got some really good pieces. And one thing about East last week, Bryce, had an effective game. I think he went for over 300. But the emergence of Jair Richburg, I know he came up from the JV team. He is a weapon. He is a dude. He'll be a nice compliment to Josh Austin on the outside as a receiver for East. So I saw him play. I saw him play in the JV game against West earlier in the season. I think he ran 2 kicks back for touchdowns.
He did.
But I knew his name from basketball circles as well. So when I put 2 and 2 together, I said, okay, he's not going to be on the JV team very long. And Plaster told me last week, yeah, he's not going back down to JV. So, but he looked good in the varsity uniform last week too. So
Yeah, he was coming up and down. They've been kind of jockeying that second wide receiver spot between Jalen Caldwell and J.P. Gilchrist, who was the quarterback on the JV last year, moved up, of course, with Bryce Baker here, moved to wide receiver. And he's kind of been the de facto number 2. Alston's been the number 1 most of the season. But yeah, they got some height. Shout out to East Forsyth basketball head coach Monty Gray, who's probably somewhere doing like this. Can't wait for basketball to start getting some height with Richburg and the boys coming in there. Give me your third game of the night. Oh, and East Forsyth and Mount Tabor's tonight on Tobacco Road Sports Radio at 7:30 p.m. But give me your third one, Mark.
Number 3, let's. I want to brag on Greensboro Dudley for a few. They might be off to one of the most impressive starts across the state. 5-0, really haven't been touched, averaging 54 points a game, allowing just 7 points a game. Last week's game against Atkins, they allowed 14 points, and that's the most any team scored on them all season.
Wow.
5-0, playing against Greensboro Smith tonight. Smith's 2-3, have a new coach this season. But Andrew Atmore, the quarterback for Dudley, this stat just kind of blows my mind. He's completed 72 of 94 passes this season. That's 76.6%. That's crazy. That's video game.
That's insane. Wow.
Yeah. Over 1,200 yards passing, 19 touchdowns. He spreads it out. He's got 3 or 4, 2 really good D1. I think they've gotten some Power 5 offer receivers. Nasir Newkirk is one of those guys. But Dudley is going to be they're going to be hard to beat in the 3A across the state. There's a couple other teams. I know West Charlotte's going to have some something to say about it.
Yeah,
Crest is going to have something to say about it. But Dudley's looking really strong so far early this season, and you know, I think that speaks well for the talent that's in Greensboro with Grimsley in kind of in the same place. They're 5-0 going into this week, and Smith. Yeah, but good football going on in Greensboro, I think, this year.
Dudley Smith is a huge deal. It always has been. The last time I called a Dudley Smith game, wow, it's been a while now. Me and Tolly Carr were calling it for Black Network Television back in the day. And that was before Smith was, I think they were just about to start renovating stuff. So their booth wasn't exactly the greatest that we were in.
Yeah, it's a strange layout.
It's really strange. I still remember to this day, before I get you out of here, I think it was homecoming for Smith. So we're at Smith. We're getting ready to call the game. And Dudley comes in, and this is Smith's homecoming. We just start hearing this rumbling from like the parking lot. Like our feet were like moving in the booth. And me and Charlie looked at each other like, what is going on? We look over the hill, and North Carolina A&T's marching band is coming down the parking lot into the field onto the Dudley side on Smith's homecoming, and sat there, and they were their band for the night. And we were just like, wow, like that's different. Wow. Like that's a whole different level of rivalry to invite your big brother to the to the fight and have him sit there and watch the whole time. So Dudley Smith is huge. We've got Grimsley Western Guilford tonight at 7:30. As well, Mike Fanning, excuse me, and Chase Williams will be on the call there. Me and Rod Funderburk, of course, will be your call at East Forsyth and Mount Tabor tonight at 7:30. You can catch both of those games on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Mark, we'll have you back next week. We're getting into the nitty-gritty. It'll be week 8 next week. We'll have some looking at the conferences and kind of see how everything's spacing out. So we'll look at that next week, and I'll see you at Mossy's on Wednesday. All right. Thanks, Desmond. Have a good one. And that's it for Franchise Players for today. Stick around. High school football coming up here in just a little bit at 7:30, depending on the station you're listening on, or on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. We will see you next week. Have a good one, Franchise Players.